Into the Lifeboat, from Titanic Survivor, memoir by Violet Jessup. You could almost imagine this a scene of busily curious people with not very much to do. True, there were officers and men briskly getting lifeboats ready to lower, their tense faces strangely in contrast to the well-ordered groups wandering about. I felt chilly without a coat, so I went down again for something to cover my shoulders and picked up a silk eiderdown from the first open cabin I came to. How strange it was to pass all those rooms lit up so brilliantly, their doors open and contents lying around in disorder. Jewels sparkled on dressing tables, and a pair of silver slippers were lying just where they had been kicked off. I gathered my eiderdown and went up. On my way, I passed a group of officers still in their mess jackets, hands in pockets, chatting quietly on the companion square, as men do who are waiting for something. They smiled at me, and I waved back. As I turned, I ran into Jock, the band leader, and his crowd with their instruments. Funny, they must be going to play, thought I, and at this late hour. Jock smiled in passing, looking rather pale for him, remarking, "Just going to give them a tune to cheer things up a bit," and passed on. Presently, the strains of the band reached me faintly as I stood on deck watching a young woman excitedly remonstrating with an embarrassed young officer. He wanted her to get into the lifeboat he was trying to fill, but she refused to go without her father. "He must wait," responded the officer, "till the decks are cleared of women and children." Out on deck, the first argument started over who would and who wouldn't go into the boats, which appeared to be suspended miles above the yawning blackness below. Nobody was anxious to move. Titanic seemed so steady. To justify their reluctance, some pointed to a light on the horizon. Another ship's lights. People were reassured, content to bide their time. One boat was already being lowered with very few people in it. When this was pointed out as a shining example for backward souls by the officer near me, he got a rather alarming response as the crowd surged forward to embark. The boat was lowered very full, almost too full this time, and so on. Always some held back in need of coaxing, while a few were too eager. A steward stood waiting with his back to the bulkhead, hands in his pockets. It struck me forcibly as the first time I had ever seen a steward stand thus, amid a group of distinguished guests. A woman standing near me gave an approving glance as John Jacob Astor handed his wife into a boat, waving encouragingly to her as he stepped back into an ever-increasing crowd of men. Anne Turnbull, still silent and unmoved, dragged a little behind me. I suggested we keep together, and we stood a while to watch. There was nothing else we could do. Dimly, I heard a shot. Glancing forward, I caught my breath as a white rocket shot up, then another. Distress rockets. They went very high with great noise. The lights on the horizon seemed to come nearer. That cheered up the group about us, who had slowly started to fill a boat. Young officers urged them to greater speed, showing unlimited patience, I thought. Another rocket went up into the night. A few women near me started to cry loudly when they realized a parting had to take place, their husbands standing silently by. They were Poles and could not understand a word of English. Surely a terrible plight to be among a crowd in such a situation and not be able to understand anything that is being said. Boats were now being lowered more rapidly, and a crowd of foreigners was brought up by a steward from the third class. They dashed eagerly as one man over to a boat, almost more than the officer could control. But he regained order and managed to get the boat away. It descended slowly, uncertainly at first, now one end up and then the other. The falls were new and difficult to handle. Some men nearby were throwing things over the side. Deck chairs, rafts, or any wooden thing lying nearby. Suddenly, the crowd of people beside me parted. A man dashed to the ship's side, and before anyone could stop him, hurled himself into the descending boat. There was a murmur of amazement and disapproval. I turned to say something to Anne. Looking along the length of the ship, I noticed the forward part of her was lower now, much lower. For a fraction of a second, my heart stood still, as is often the case when faith, hitherto unshaken faith, gets its first setback. One of the mailmen from our sorting office joined us. His work was finished, he remarked unemotionally. The mail is floating up to F deck with the water, he told us. I tried not to hear what he said, not wanting to believe what he accepted so stoically. Instead, I listened to the faint sounds of music from Jock's men. They were playing, "Nearer My God to Thee." My arm was suddenly jerked, and I turned to see young Mason, who had been busy filling a boat. His face looked weary and tired, but he gave a bright smile as he ordered my group into the boat, calling out, "Good luck," as we stepped in, helped by his willing, guiding hand. I nearly fell over the tackle and oars as I tried to assist Anne in beside me. She was suffering with her feet, I could see, and found her life belt got in the way of moving freely. Before I could do anything, young Mason hailed me and held up something, calling as he prepared to throw it, "Look after this, will you?" And I reached out to receive somebody's forgotten baby in my arms. It started to whimper as I pressed it to me, the hard cork surface of the lifebelt being anything but a comfort, poor mite. The boat was full now, full of people with dull, inquiring faces. I spoke to one woman, but she shook her head, not understanding a word I said. Groaning, the boat descended a fearful distance into that inky blackness beneath, intensified as the lights fell on it occasionally. Surely it is all a dream, I thought, as I looked up the side of the ship, beautifully illuminated, each deck alive with lights. The dynamos were on the top deck. I tried to make myself believe it could not be true, all this. I even noticed a few people leaning over the rail, watching in an unconcerned manner. Perhaps they too were persuading themselves it was a bad dream. We touched the water with a terrific thud, a bone-cracking thud, which started the baby crying in earnest. Somebody in the forepart ordered oars out, and we slowly pulled away from the side of the ship. I noticed one of the few men in the boat rowing. He was a fireman who had evidently just come up from the stokehold, his face still black with coal dust and eyes red-rimmed, wearing only a thin singlet to protect him from the icy cold. Fascinated, my eyes never left the ship, as if by looking I could keep her afloat. I reflected that but 4 days ago I had wished to see her from afar, to be able to admire her underway. Now, there she was, my Titanic, magnificent queen of the ocean, a perfection of man's handiwork, her splendid lines outlined against the night, every light twinkling. I started unconsciously to count the decks by the rows of lights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I stopped. Surely I had miscounted. I went over them again more carefully, hushing the whimpering baby meanwhile. No, I had made no mistake. There were only 5 decks now. Then I started all over again. Only 4 now. She was getting lower in the water. I could not any longer deny it. As if all could read my mind, the women in the boat started to weep, some silently, some unrestrainedly. I closed my eyes and prayed for one and all, but dared not think of anyone in particular. I dared not visualize those people I had just left, warm and alive as I was. I tried to busy myself with the baby, but could not refrain from looking up again. Only 3 decks now, and still not a list to one side or the other. Desperately, I turned to where that other ship's light shone on the horizon. Surely they should be getting nearer by now. It was such a long, long time since we had first seen their comforting glow. They should be with us by now, taking off those patient waiting people over there. But no, she did not seem nearer. In fact, She seemed further away. Strange. A tiny breeze, the first we had felt on this calm night, blew an icy blast across my face. It felt like a knife in its penetrating coldness. I sat paralyzed with cold and misery as I watched Titanic give a lurch forward. One of the huge funnels toppled off like a cardboard model, falling into the sea with a fearful roar. A few cries came to us across the water, then silence, as the ship seemed to right herself like a hurt animal with a broken back. She settled for a few minutes, but one more deck of lighted ports disappeared. Then she went down by the head with a thundering roar of underwater explosions. Our proud ship, our beautiful Titanic, gone to her doom. One awful moment of empty, misty blackness enveloped us in its loneliness. Then an unforgettable, agonizing cry went up from 1,500 despairing throats. A long wail, and then silence, and our tiny craft tossing about at the mercy of the ice field.